Okay, so now we're going to move on to add a activation requirement for the accounts. And normally you see on websites that once you register, you can't just log in immediately. You usually get an email and you have to activate it. That's becoming pretty common practice. So we're going to go ahead and implement that in this application. So we want to start off by going to the model that we created, the user model. And so we're going to add 2 additional fields to this. We're going to add a field that lets us know if the account is active, and also a temporary token field that we can use to send that link to the email. Okay, so go ahead and name the first field active. Will be type boolean required true, default false. And so what this is saying is when the user registers, they're going to have an active status. It's automatically going to be set to false, meaning their account won't be activated until we send them that link. Once they click on that link, this will become true. The next one's going to be temporary token. Whoops, let's make it all lowercase. Temporary token type going to be string required true. Now, we didn't set a default here, so what that means is that we have to go into the API and ensure we're assigning this, right? So go into your routes folder, into api.js. Okay, and this is all the information that we're getting from the user when they register. Now, right now, this is going to cause an error because temporary token is not included there, right? And we set it to require true, so if we don't include it in here in the request, then it's gonna shoot an error, right? So we can add it to it. We can say user.temporaryToken, and we could set a default value to this, right? We don't need to get it from the user because the user's not going to give us this value. We're going to be setting it here, right? So what I'll do is I'll search. This is the token that we create when the user logs in. I'm just going to copy that and use that up here. Okay. Oops. And I'm going to assign that to that temporary token, right? So all this is doing is when the user logs in, they're submitting this information, and then we're going in and assigning a token to this variable and saving it in the database. And so while we're here, let's go ahead and change this success message, the one right here that says user created. Let's change that to, we'll say account registered. And we'll say, please check your email for activation link. Okay. Okay, so now we need a way to send them this token to their email address, right? So we can use something that works really well with Node called Sendgrid. So if you search Node emailer Sendgrid transport in Google, you'll get this page, right? And the one we want is the one that comes from the Sendgrid blog. Okay, so basically these are 2 separate things, right? Node emailer is something that just comes from Node, and Sendgrid is a service for forwarding emails, right? And so of course, and here you'll see that's what I was referring to. So you'll need both of those in order to work this. Now, Sendgrid is a paid service, so you only get 30 days trial of email forwarding, and then you have to subscribe. I don't know that there are any free services out there, but I know that you can set this to use STMP, like your Gmail or something like that. It's pretty easy to set up. I think they have instructions on doing that. But for right now, we're just going to follow their example and use Sendgrid. So go ahead and sign in or sign up for an account. And then once you do that, go ahead and copy this entire code. And then I'm just going to paste it at the top here at the very beginning of the API. And so what you want to do is cut these 2 and place them up here, of course, and then copy this, because basically what you need to do is install both of these packages with npm, right? One's called node mailer and the other one's this right here. Okay, so go into your console, npm install. I said the first one's node mailer, and that's the other one, and then hit save. Afterwards, you want to go ahead and change this to match your Sendgrid account information. So just go ahead and enter mine. Okay. And so what you'll want to do is you can leave the configuration stuff at the top, but go ahead and cut this email portion out. This is basically the template that you're going to send out to the user. Okay. So you want to get to the registration success portion, which is right here, and then go ahead and insert some breaks, and this is where we're going to send the email. Once the user successfully registers, then we're going to send them the token. Okay. So let me just bring this up really quick. Okay, and then in the from box, I'm just going to go ahead and enter whatever. I'm just going to hit localhost staff. Just put staff at localhost.com. I'll leave this like that for now. Subject's going to be activation. Say localhost activation link. So this text field is basically the plain text version of it, in case their email can't translate HTML, which is unusual, but that's just a just in case portion there. And then this bottom portion, what it does is it executes the email, sends it out, and if there's an error, it'll log it to the command prompt, the console, and tell you exactly why. So you don't really need this else part, but for testing purposes, you can leave it in there, just so you can see that, confirm that it did go out. So now we need to go ahead and insert our HTML, what we want to say in the email. Now Sendgrid does have a lot of really cool templates that you can use, and there's a lot of them out there that you can do. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but we're just going to use, for the simplicity of this tutorial and keeping it short, I'm just going to insert some basic HTML here, and that's what we'll use for right now. So what I'll say is, I'll say hello, I'll say plus user, then we have the user's name, so we can just call it out here. Go back with the comma, and actually I'm just going to go ahead and put this in bold, so say strong. Okay. Couple breaks, and I'll say thank you for registering at localhost.com. Please click on the link below to complete your activation. Couple breaks, and then I'll just provide a link for right now just to the website, to the localhost itself, and of course if yours is different, then it would link to whatever website it is, but later on we're going to go back and edit this. And so what we'll do is we'll create a website, we'll create a route that the users go to activate their account. So I'm going to name that page activate, right? And then what I'll do is I'm going to insert the token here, right? And so the way you do that is right after the slash, you just end with a, I forget what that's called, but add the temporary token here. So user.temporary token. Okay. And then if you want, what you can do is you can do the same thing here, but what's going to happen is in their email, they're going to see just a really long number and stuff. So you might just want to have this appear in the email. Of course, this is just a basic template. Of course, if this was an HTML email, I mean, they look way different. They look a lot better. So, but for this tutorial, we're just going to keep it really basic. So after you're done with that, what you want to do is copy this entire thing here all the way down, to here, and then just paste it in the text portion in case the user doesn't have HTML. But what you'll have to do is go back in and take out all the HTML portion of it. So I'm just going to do that really quick. And then what you want to do is, in place of this to, you want to type in the user email, right? So that'll look like this, user.email. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to create this route, right, that I called out right here, right? The activate. So go over into your public folder, into app, views, pages, users, and then we'll make a folder just for activation templates, right? So we'll say activation. Inside of activation, we'll create activate.html. And then what we'll enter here is we'll just go to the login page and copy that and then paste it inside here. Only we don't need these error messages. We only need the one here, the main error message and the main success message. We can get rid of this loading. I'm not going to use it. And then change this top to count activation. We're not going to need the form either, so. Okay. And then go into your routes, and then we're going to create a route for that. Name it activate. Template URL. It's going to be app, views, pages, users. What did I call it? Activation / activate.html. And then the controller that we're going to assign, we're going to use a new one, and we're going to name it email controller because I want to make a controller just for this. And I'll name it, actually I meant to put, so put email. And so let's go ahead and create that controller really quick before I forget. So inside of the controllers folder, create a new one called email control.js. Don't forget to also add token right here, because the token that we give the user, this is how we're going to grab it through the URL. So now what we need to do is create a route to return to this controller. Okay, so go back into your API, and at the very bottom before the middleware, before router.use, we'll just create a new one and we'll name it router.put/activate/token, right? Because we're going to take the token in the URL and follow that with a function, request response. Okay, so this time we're going to search the database for a user, and we're going to use the temporary token. And we're going to get it from the parameters, right? I'm sorry, this is wrong. It's params.token. So in other words, we're going to grab the token from when the user clicks on it in their email, it's going to be in the browser URL or the address bar, and then we're going to grab it and then search the database using that. Okay. We're either going to get an error or a user. Okay. And then, of course, if error, then throw error. And then we'll create a variable and assign it the token from the URL. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to steal this code down here. Let's see, where does it end? I'm going to use this to verify, because what we want to do is once we get that token, we want to verify that it is a valid token and it hasn't expired, right? And of course, we're setting that right here, not there actually, up here. When we give them the token right here, we're saying it expires in 24 hours. You can change that if you want. You can give them 2 days to activate their account, whatever you feel is right. But that's what we're doing here. We're checking that token to make sure it hasn't expired, or maybe they requested a new one and then it invalidated this one. So we're doing that check, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to, if error, then of course we're going to put, we'll say activation link has expired. Okay. We're going to take this out. We're going to need that. But we're going to change this to an else if statement. And we'll have a final else right here, right? So, and what we're saying here is if if user isn't true. Basically what this means is the token is good. It hasn't expired, but it doesn't match the token of any user in the database, right? And so the way that can happen is, let's say I request a token and it's sent to my email, but then I request another one. Well, that first one shouldn't work anymore, right? So that's what the check that we're doing here, right? So we'll say res.json, and really we can copy the same thing because technically it has expired if that happens. Really it's deleted completely, but you can just say that you can just use the same error message. And then we're going to say, of course, res.json, success, true, message, account has been, or we'll just say account activated. Okay. So remember, we have 2 fields that we need to change now, right? So we need to change the user's temporary token. We need to clear that out so we can set it to false. The other one is the active field that we created. Remember, it's false by default. So now we can set it to true, which will let the user log in. Okay. The other thing that we need to do is, well, one, we need to save this, but also we need to send the user an email letting them know, hey, your account's been activated. Okay. So let's go ahead and save it. So we'll say save, and then I'm going to check for errors. So I'll pass in a function. We'll say if error, then log it to the console. Actually, let me put that in brackets. Okay, and then I'll say else. And this is where I'll put the JSON actually. Okay, and so what I want to do now is I'm just going to grab this same email template and use that. Okay, only this one I'll just say localhost account activated. I'll change this to say hello. Let's say hello. Your account has been successfully activated. And I'll just copy that up here as well. All right, so let me go ahead and fix this up a bit. Okay, so now that we've successfully created the route, we can go ahead and use it. So I'm just going to copy this. So what we want to do is go into our services and create a new one, right? So inside of services, go into user services. At the very bottom, we'll create a new one. I'll name this one, say activate account. Okay. And then, of course, we'll say return http.put/API/activate plus token. And then we'll pass that token up here. Okay, so it matches the route just like we need it to. So this will look like this. Say user activate account with token passed in, right? I'm just going to copy that, and then I'm going to use it in the controller now, right? So I'm going to paste it in there, but I'm going to comment it out. So in order to do that, first let's make sure that this route is indeed working. Try to register. and make sure you get that message down here that says check your email. Also, if you check your console log, you should see the message sent, and that's coming from the API right here where we said console log message sent. And then go to your email, make sure you have the email. Sometimes if you're sending it from localhost, it may appear in your spam depending on your settings. I'm not sure about other email accounts, but go ahead and open up the email, and you'll see all the text that we entered. And so what you want to do is go ahead and click that link that you created for yourself. And you also notice the Sendgrid here. So one of the downsides of using a trial service. But anyway, go ahead and click that link and make sure it takes you to the website. So here's our new route that we created, and here you'll see the route and the token. Okay. So what we need to do now is grab that token. So going back to the controller, recall that the way to grab that is with route params. And so we'll go ahead and pass that into the function. And then for right now, let's just say console log route params.token. Okay. Just want to make sure that we can grab it. So hit refresh on your page, and then you'll see in the console right there the entire token. So now we're ready to use this new service that we created, right? Now don't forget that you also have to pass the name of the service, right? So our service is called user services right up here, and the factory is user. So we actually have to pass that in the controller. So up here in the array brackets, which is all of our dependencies, we paste that in there, the user services. And in the function, we pass in user factory, all right, just like that, and that lets us pull that in here. So without that, this won't be valid. So now we're going to run this upon the page loading, and then we're going to say then function data, and let's log the data and see what we get back from our server. So what we need to do is actually take this and paste it in place of token. Right. I don't know why it's not letting me paste. There we go. And you can delete that console log. So now go ahead and hit refresh. Now you'll notice it's not doing anything, and inside the console we're getting an error here that says validation error for the password. Now the reason for this, if you go to your user model, you'll see that we have a validation for the password and for the email, for the username, right? Now, we're not worried about the password for this, right? We're just trying to grab a token, and we're also changing the active and temporary token. Let me show you what I'm talking about here, right? So in our activate route, all that we're touching is right here, temporary token, active, right? But password is being checked as well. That's why we're getting that error there, because it's saying, hey, the password is not complete. So we need to go a little bit further in order to change this. We have to prevent this route from grabbing password and all those other fields, right? But password is really the one that matters in this case. So what we'll need to do here is go back into your user model, and at the very end of password, go ahead and pass in another field that says select false, right? And this will prevent that route from grabbing that. There's one additional thing that we need to do. Down here in the user schema, so we'll say if user is modified password. So what we want to say here is if the password hasn't been modified, then just return next. In other words, we're getting an error here because it's trying, before we save anything to the database, it's trying to run that password through this preliminary check here. So what we're saying here is, hey, if the password hasn't been touched, then don't even do this. Just jump next and jump out of this check, right? So now we can go back and hit refresh on our page, and now it accesses the route properly. And here is our object. So let's take a look at what we have. If you go inside of data, you'll see that activation link has expired. Now the reason for that is because we've hit refresh too many times now, and we've already invalidated this token. But what you can do is delete the user out of your database and then just re-register and then test it out, right? So I'll do that really fast. Just going to delete the user. And then I'm going to re-register. Delete the old email. Oh, by the way, here's the email that you get once you've activated it. Your account has been successfully activated. So we got that once we hit refresh here, but I want to redo it so that you see the full, you want to make sure you get that success here, right? So go ahead and click on the new link and then open up your console and look at your object. See, now it says success true, account activated. Okay, so that's what we want. So let's give the user a message letting them know, hey, your message or your activation worked, right? So going back to our controller, we'll say if data.success, then we'll give them, actually let me do this first. Assign this to a variable and we'll say app.success message equals whatever is in the API. Okay. And then otherwise we'll give them an error message. Okay. So let me just include these two variables up here. There we go. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to make sure every time that button is pressed, or I mean the page loads, these are cleared out, just in case. So let's go back to the HTML code, right? The activate page, and let's configure this. We got this from the login page, so let's change this to match the email controller, right? Remember, we use controller as email, so we just need to paste this over all the main. So go ahead and hit refresh on your page now, and you'll see activation link has expired because it has, right? So once again, I'm going to go ahead and delete the user again because I want to make sure that I'm getting a success message as well as an error message, right? So I'm going to go ahead and register again. And then I'm going to click that link. Make sure I get a success message. And there you go, account activated. And then if you hit refresh, of course, you get that has expired, right? And so that's why I added the two variables here to clear them out, just in case the user hits refresh or something. You see that it goes away and then it reloads. That's what that's for. So now what we need to do is we want to make sure that users can't log in that haven't activated their account. So what we need to do is go into the API and go into the route for logging users in, which is this one right here, okay? And what we'll do is after we validated their password, we want to add an additional validation that checks to see if their account is active. And so right below here, we'll add another statement. We'll say else if user is not active, then we'll respond with JSON. We'll say false, and the message will be account is not yet activated. And then we can, I guess we can add something like, please check your email for activation link. Now, because we're using this active field from the user, we also have to add it up here as select. So we have to add it here. Okay, and what I want you to do is make sure that you can't log in if you haven't activated the account, right? So purposely register a new account, but don't activate it and then hit login. And you should get that new error that we created. And then once you go into your email and activate it, you should be able to log in. So go ahead and make sure to test that. And there you go. Now, one thing that I want to do is you don't want to leave users on this page. Because it's kind of pointless. You want to redirect them to the login. So let's just add that in there really quick. So we'll just go to the controller and we'll say, we'll just add plus ... redirecting. We'll say timeout function location.path, and we'll redirect them to the login page. And we'll say after 2 seconds. Don't forget to pass that up here. If they get an error, I guess, yeah, I guess we can redirect them as well. So we'll just do the same thing. So what happens if the user loses their activation link, right? We want to give them an option to request a new link. So what we'll do is we'll add a button next to this message that says request new link. So how we do that? Well, let's go into the activate HTML page. And of course, they're only going to need a new one after the error message. They won't need one if it's success, obviously. So we'll say, let's actually grab a button from the login page. Actually, let's just do it in the login page first, because once they go to log in, if it gives them that error of, hey, your account's not active like this, we want to give them an option to request a new one, right? So let's copy one of these buttons that we'll use. We'll say, we'll just use a Facebook one, right? And I'm going to put it into a link. And I'm going to link them to a page. Let's name it Resend. Okay. We can get rid of this ng click right here. And then instead of Facebook, we'll change this to Resend activation link. Okay. And then we'll paste that next to the error message. Okay, let's put a space there. Now, obviously we don't want to display this at all times, right? Like, say I enter the wrong password. Well, I don't want this big button to be here, right? So what we'll do is we'll create a variable in the API that we can use. So this is the login route, right? And this is the one where the user hasn't activated an account. So what we'll do is we'll add an additional variable to send with JSON object, and we'll name it, we'll say expired true. So let's go into our main controller. That is the one that handles the login for the main application. So right here, let's find the error portion of it. So let's actually just cut this out right here. We'll say if data.data.expired is true, then we'll do this portion of it, else we'll just do this, right? So then what we'll do, we'll create a new variable, we'll name it app dot, we'll just say expired, same thing. And then we'll paste that right here. Right, so basically what I'm doing is, if the JSON object returns expired true from the data, meaning if the user has not activated their account, we'll catch it here and then return, we'll create a variable that we can use on the front end, right? And then set this to true, hit save. Okay, and so now let's go into the login page and we'll use that variable. We'll say ng-show main.expired, right? So in summation, this is what we did, right? When the user tries to log in, they'll access this route. If they get good username, we'll continue. Password good, then it gets here. Now, if they haven't activated their account, we'll return this as an object. We'll return three things: success, message, and expired as true. And then in the controller, we're checking that. We're checking to see if it is true. If it is, then we'll set a variable to true along with the error message. And if it's not, we'll just send a regular error message. And so what we'll do with this variable is in the login page, we'll use it right here. once it's set to true, then that extra button will come up, right? So what you can do is just hit refresh. If you enter the wrong password, the button doesn't show up now. If you enter the right password but it's not active, then the button comes up, right? And then this button will link them to our page that requests a new activation link. So one thing you may have noticed is the Facebook and Twitter Google buttons still work. If you click on those, it will log you in. Now the reason for that is because in our passport route, we're not checking that field, right? So go into your backend app and then passport into your passport.js. And right here where we're serializing, this is why it's still working, because we're giving them a token no matter what. We're not checking the active field. So what we need to do is go ahead and check that active field. So what we'll do is we'll say if user.active, then give them the token, else don't give them the token, right? So let's just paste that up here. And then so the way we don't give them a token is we just assign something else to token. We'll say, for right now, we'll say active dot, we'll say inactive slash, did I spell that right? Inactive slash error. Okay. Now, the reason I did that like that is because, so this isn't going to come up as an error for Facebook or Twitter or Google, right? If you go down to our routes, our errors actually redirect them to a page. However, this isn't actually an error that's known to Passport. So what it will do is still redirect them to the success page, right? The Google plus token. So instead what I did is I added this to the token, because what it'll do is, okay, so it's inactive slash error. So when they're redirected to Facebook, it'll be Facebook slash inactive slash error. And then with Angular routes, I can go ahead and grab that and give the user the same error message that we were doing before. Okay. However, we need to do the same thing here that we did in the other routes. We have to specify active. Otherwise, Passport won't grab it from the user in the database. So make sure you add active to your Facebook, to your Twitter, and then also to your Google. Okay, so now we can go ahead and head to the controller that handles the Facebook login, right, which is our user controller. Go ahead and scroll down to the Facebook, Twitter, Google controllers. And right here, we'll just add an additional condition. We'll say else if, okay, and we'll just copy the same thing up here, paste that here, except we'll change this to the route that we got from Passport right here. So I'm just going to copy that because I probably won't remember it. I'm just going to paste it up here somewhere. So we'll say if path name is slash inactive slash error, then our error message is going to be different. It's going to be, well, let's just copy the same one from here, from our API, right? Okay. Let me make sure I got this up here as well. Okay, so now we just need to do this same thing below in Google and Twitter. So I'll just paste this. As well as this. So now what we need to do is actually create the route that has the new page here, right? So the way we do that is go into our routes, and then we'll just copy the ones from up here. We'll just grab this Facebook one and paste it right below here. We'll say Facebook /inactive/error. And we'll keep everything else the same. Nothing needs to change. And then we'll change these to Google and Twitter. Okay, so hit save on that and go back to the user controller. And looking at the route there, I just remembered this is actually going to be a little bit different. It's going to be Twitter /inactive/error. And then Google /inactive, Facebook, I mean. And then Google here. And then you can see that just from going to the routes here and seeing that there. And then, whoops, forgot the slash there. There we go. So go ahead and hit save and let's try this out and make sure it's working. Make sure to hit refresh, and then of course we're getting it with the login button, but let's also try, I don't know, Twitter. And there we go, we're getting our error message. So now what we can do is we can use a variable to give that resend button, right? So we'll say app.expired equals false, and then we'll set it to true right here. Okay. And then on the login page, we'll add that button to each one of these other error messages, right? So we can just copy and paste this. Paste it to the Facebook, Twitter, Google. Okay, and then instead just change this main to Facebook, Twitter, and then Google. Whoops, looks like I got extra bracket there. Fix that. So once you hit save, go ahead and make sure that we're getting the button now. Go ahead and make sure you try all three of them. Make sure you hit refresh as well. And there you go. Now we're getting that from all methods of login. So now what we need to do is actually build that page that reactivates or resends the activation link. So if you recall, I set it to resend. That is the link that that it sends, right? /resend. So let's go ahead and build that page. Inside the activation folder, we'll create a new file called resend.html. And what we'll do is, again, we'll copy the login page and then just use that for our send. We'll change the title here, resend activation link. We're not going to need this Facebook and Google stuff, and we're not going to need these buttons as well. And so what I want to do now is I actually want to create another controller specifically just for this page. So we'll do it inside of the email controller module. All right, so we'll just add a new one down here at the bottom. I'm going to name this one Resend Controller. Okay. And so now we can go ahead and implement the new route. So go into your routes folder file and let's create the new one. Say when/resend, oops, not function, template URL, take them to app/views. And that's our controller, and we'll use controller as resend. Okay. So going back to the resend page, let's go ahead and change all of this, all the mains to resend. Okay, there we go. Actually, we're not going to need the button here because that just takes them to the same page. Oops, there we go. And then I'll just change this to submit. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Go ahead and hit refresh and try to log in. And then hit that reactivation link. Okay, so this is what the page looks like. And the way I'm doing this is we don't want to just let people just enter any username and send them the link. What we want to do is we want to make sure they know the credentials of the account first. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a route that checks these credentials, and if it's correct, it sends them the link, and if it's not, then it says, hey, no, you can't. This isn't your account. Right? And we do that just to avoid people spamming each other or whatever. So let's create that API. Go ahead and go into your api.js file, and we'll create a new one. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy the authenticate one because it's going to be very similar. And except we're going to call it something else. We'll call it Resend. And then same thing, we're going to use the username, and we're just going to change this up a bit. Okay. And the only difference is once we get down here to if the user is not active, we're actually going to change it to if the user is active. And if they are active, then we'll say something like account is already activated. Okay. And then we don't need a token. And instead of this, we'll just respond back with the user itself. Okay. Then I'm just going to copy this and go into our user services, and we're going to create a new one. Say user factory. And this one's going to be called, we'll say check credentials. Okay. And I'll just paste this down here for a second. We'll say return http:/resend. We'll say login data. And pass that in here as well. Then delete this. And so that will look like this. User check credentials, login data. Whoops, actually before we do that, don't forget to pass API/resend. Okay, so now we're ready to use that in our email controller. So I will just paste that here, and then I'm going to comment that out for a second. Okay. So first, let's go ahead and assign this to the app, and then we'll create a new function. We'll just name it the same exact thing. Check credentials. Okay. And let's add that to the Resend HTML page. Okay. We'll say on submit, instead of do login, we're going to do check credentials using the data from the username and password fields, right? And then, so we have to pass that here, login data. And then we'll say, then we'll use this. Okay, uncomment it out. And then we'll say then function data. And for right now, we'll just log it to the console. Don't forget to pass it in here as well. Bring this up here. Okay, and so since in order for this to work, since we created a new controller here, we have to pass it up in the function, oops, just like we did up here. Okay, and don't forget to add app.login data for this. Okay, and then going back to the API, I just realized we're going to be checking credentials, so we need the password, and I didn't specify that here. So what we need to do, if you remember in the user model, I set false for password validator. So it's not going to grab the password, so we need to specify that. So we can just copy up here what we did. and then paste that right here. Okay, and we don't need email. Okay, so now we're ready to test this out. Go ahead and go to your Resend page and then hit refresh, and then try to log in with the valid credentials. Well, first make sure you have incorrect credentials, like say the username. Make sure that it is logging that here. So here we go, cannot authenticate user, and then go ahead and use correct credentials. And then you'll see in the data here, it says we get our user object back, right? Because remember, in our JSON, in the API, we're just responding with the user. We're not responding with any success or error message. We don't have a way to know if we're getting the user back successfully. So let's actually go back into the API and add that here, right? So we'll just say success, true, and then there. So now if we hit refresh and we hit submit, we actually get that success variable. So now we can do something with it. We can go back into the controller, and then we can say if data.success. Okay, so right here is where we will execute the resending of the link. And then right here we'll create a message. Of course it didn't work if it's at this point. So let's go ahead and make sure that this error message works. Go ahead and hit refresh, enter the wrong username. Okay, you get that error message there, and then enter the wrong password and make sure that works. Okay. Of course, if you enter the right password, you get no errors at all. So now we can go ahead and start creating our new route that's going to actually send the link here, right? So what we'll do in our API file, we'll just use the same route, except we'll do a put request, right? So that's going to look like this: router.put/resend request response. So we're going to use the username to find the user in the database, because that's what we have. We have the user object, so we'll say username request.body.username. Okay, and we don't need to specify anything for this. So we'll say error user. Of course, if error, then throw the error. Now we don't need to specify if there is no user found like we did up here, because by this route we already have a user because we're getting it from here. So we can just go right into our code. So recall for the activation link in the if you go to the register route, the way we gave them an activation link is using a token, and we setting that token. So we can just do the same thing all over again. Okay, so we'll just do this, and then we'll hit save. We'll say user.save function error. If error, log it to the console. Actually, I put that in brackets, say there. Then we'll do else. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll send them the email just like we did above in the registration route. So let me grab all of this. This goes down to here. Yep. Okay. And then paste it here. Okay. So we just need to change this up a bit. We'll say localhost activation link request. Then we'll say you recently requested a new account activation link. Change this. Then paste it here. Okay, and I want to do one last thing. I just realized that we're using the email, the name, and all this stuff here, right? So one thing that I want to avoid is um, I don't want any of this to be undefined. So what I want to do is basically do the same thing that we did up here. Sorry, I forgot about that. And then we'll just change this. We don't need any of these. We'll need username. We'll need name. We'll need email. And then we'll need temporary token. Okay, so go ahead and hit save on that and copy this and then go into your services, and we're going to create a new one. Okay, just paste that somewhere at the bottom here. And we'll say user factory, and we'll name this one Resend link. Return put /API/resend, and then pass the username. Oops. Okay, and that will look like this. User.resend link, username. All right, so now we can go into our email controller and add that to our success option here, right? Just bring this down and paste this here for a sec. Okay, so I'll change this to login data. Oops, forgot the app. And then I will do the same exact thing that we did above. And for now, I'll log data to make sure it worked. All right, and then before we test this out, let's go back into the API. I forgot to add the response, otherwise this will just be hanging. So after you send the email, go ahead and respond with JSON, and we'll do success true. And then for the message, we'll say activation link. Oops. Has been sent to the user.email. We'll do exclamation point. Okay, so hit save, and then let's test this out. Go ahead and hit refresh and enter the correct credentials and try to hit submit. And you'll see here is our object, and it says activation link has been sent, and there's my email address and success true. Let's verify that this happened, and there it is. Localhost activation link request. And then you can click on it and reactivate your account. Now you may want to add some new options here that say if this wasn't you, contact our staff or something like that. But anyway, this is just a tutorial for the basics, so you choose what you want to do with that. One thing that I do want to do is I don't think I already checked this, but make sure that if your account is already activated, that you get that appropriate error message. So now let's configure the success message. So we need to do right here, say if data.success, just the same as above, nothing changed. App.success message. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and delete my user really quick and re-register. Okay, and now I'm going to refresh the page and hit submit and make sure I get that success message there. Okay, and then you'll see that it indeed sent it there. Okay, so we're pretty much done here. The last thing that we need to do is, it's kind of unrelated, but you notice that even after this is successful, you can continue to hit submit, which is basically going to spam your inbox and going to send multiple requests to the server, which you want to avoid. Same thing with the login page, right? if you spam the login button, you can send many requests. So what we want to do is disable this. So let's start off with the login page. So go into your main controller. Actually, let me close out all these files. Let's go into the main controller, and this is the function for when a user logs in, right? So let's add a new variable and we'll name it disabled. We'll set it to true. And what this means is anytime the user presses the login button, it's going to disable the form. And we're going to set it to false. In other words, remove the disabling of the form once if there's an error, right? That way the user can try again. So we'll insert that here. And we don't need to do it up here because if the accounts expire, then there's no need to allow the user to keep trying. So next, let's go into the login page. And then let's disable, let's select the things we want to disable, right? So the first input username, we want to disable that. So we'll add in ngDisabled. Okay, and then we'll paste that variable. Whoops. Change this to main, the name of the controller. Okay, and then we'll just add this to the rest. We'll add this to password. Okay, and then I also want to disable the button here. Now, this isn't going to work on the Facebook, Twitter, and Google buttons. What we'll have to do, we have to do additional disabling. So what we need to do is go back into the main controller and find those 3 logins, which are right here, and then just add it there. We'll say app disabled equals true. Okay, and then we also have to go into the errors pages for Facebook, Twitter, and Google and do the same thing, right? So this is a user controller. If the user gets an error, this is where they're directed, and we'll do the same thing here. And so because of that, on the main page, we also have to add additional criteria. We have to say, if main is disabled, or Facebook.disabled, or Twitter.disabled, or Google.disabled. Okay, so we'll just copy that, paste it here. And don't forget also for username, I forgot to paste it up there. So I'll just paste this right here. Go ahead and hit save on that, and let's check this out. So first thing that I want to make sure is enter the wrong password and ensure that the form is not locked, right? You don't want it disabled because then the user can't try again, right? Of course, you can set criteria like after 3 tries or something. But for right now, we just want to make sure that when they log in wrong, it doesn't lock them. But if they do log in incorrectly and the account's inactive, then we do want to lock this because there's no reason for them to keep trying. We already know their account's not yet activated. So also make sure that all the other buttons are disabled as well. Otherwise, you didn't enter the criteria correctly in the ngDisabled. Go ahead and hit refresh, and also test when you click the button of social media login. It should also disable the rest of the buttons. Okay. And then when it gets to the error page, because of this, all the buttons should also be disabled, right? So next, let's pass this on to our resend page, right? We want to do the same thing here. Once the user gets success, we want to disable it so they can't keep sending requests to the server. So we'll do the same thing, but close this out. We don't need our user controller. Go into the email controller, right? This is our controller that's attached to the resend page. And so what we'll do, as soon as the user presses that button, we'll create that variable and set it to true. And then we'll set it to false if there's an error. Okay, and so now we can go into the resend page. Where is it? There it is. And then use that criteria, right? So we'll say ngDisabled if resend.disabled is true. Okay. All right, so let's make sure this is working. Go ahead and hit refresh and hit submit on there. And there you go. Once it has that success there, you no longer are able to modify those fields. Now hit refresh and enter wrong information and make sure that it does not become locked. Now you'll see that mine is locked, and that's because I didn't change the variable to false once it does become error, right? Make sure you do not make that mistake. It's very easy to do. So just hit refresh and test it out and make sure. There we go. Okay, now you can do the same thing with the register page. We'll just do this last one and then we're done. So go ahead and close that out and go into your user controller and go into the registration controller right here. We'll do the same thing. As soon as the user presses that button, we'll create disabled and we'll set it to true. And then we'll set it to false if success. So right here, we'll set it to false. Or I'm sorry, not if success. We want to keep it frozen if it's success. Right here is where we want to. All right, and also down here. Okay, basically this error is if the user already exists, and this error is if the form is incorrect. Okay. Okay, and then go into your registration page, and then just add that criteria, just like we did before. So we'll go into the inputs, ngDisabled. Okay. Add that to email. Okay, so now let's test this. Go ahead and hit refresh, and first make sure it doesn't become disabled if it's incorrect, and then try to actually register a valid account. And then make sure once you hit submit, it actually disables the form, and there we go. Got a form disabled. Now it does look like the name there is not disabled, but it actually is. All right, that covers it for this tutorial video. Thank you for tuning in.